Love on the Wing, a Hubert and Marianne story. Written by Quillful. Read by Arashi. Content warnings include traditional gender roles. The secrets sheltered in Hubert's heart were far more appealing to him those days. His anniversary with Marianne started like any other in the years before it, although he had invested quite a bit of additional preparation and resources into this one. Not for any particular reason, unaffected as he was by the arbitrary societal expectations placed on milestones in a relationship. Hubert never needed a reason to express his affections for his wife in ways that suited them both. After all, who would he be if he could not combine discretion with sincerity? The present was a surprise even to his intended. She followed his lead downstairs to the grand hall, eyes closed, and smile soft, her gentle hand in his scarred one. Both unified in love represented by engraved silver rings, peridot for his eyes, and aquamarine for her hair, each chosen by the other. How fitting that her steadfast support inspired him to go without his gloves more often. "Hubert," Marianne implored him, and reached out blindly for the railing with her other hand, excitement growing in her airy voice. "Where are we going?" "Patience, my bluebird. You will see soon." He presumed that her warm brown eyes would have lit up at that cherished pet name, had he not asked her to close them, an enthusiasm for the nickname that he found yet more infectious with time. This excursion relied on a solid trust shared between them. For him, it called on the conviction that she wouldn't open her eyes until he said it was time. For Marianne, she held on to the confidence that he would never harm her, that his hands, which had wrought so much destruction, would only take care of her for the rest of his days. Sentimentality brought him to recreate the first festivity that followed the announcement of their courtship, a rare bout of nostalgia for Hubert. Their reserved natures made them apprehensive of the crowds that day. Prolonged retreats from the event simply couldn't have been possible. This elaborate gift was to be their chance at a ball that was carefully crafted to their liking. None of the horrid gossips or prying eyes. Simply a gorgeous ballroom befitting his bride. It mattered not that their wedding was long since behind them. "All right, now." Grinning even before she fully opened her eyes, Marianne drew out the reveal for herself with an almost painfully slow response. It could have been 3 seconds. Hubert had the added anticipation of planning the occasion for the better part of the year. Candlelight caught in her eyes, as rich and nurturing as the earth itself. As she took in the decorated grand hall, he was gifted with a sight of her joy, transforming to starry-eyed awe. A delicate hand came up to her mouth as she scanned the elaborate preparations. Chandeliers shone overhead, with intricate metalwork accents. Luxurious white linens covered the circular tables, adorned by lush bouquets of lilies of the valley. A deviation from the original night, to appeal to his wife alone, naturally. Polished tiled floors awaited for their solitary dance to celebrate so many years together, making it all the more meaningful for their privacy. Her grip on his hand tightened, and she brought him closer with a tender hug. Hubert rested a hand on the small of her back. Loose blue curls framed her glowing face, like she wore back in their academy days, although she had since abandoned the tight bun to style her hair in a braid the length of her back, a task she often granted to Hubert at his request. Marianne slipped from his embrace, to drift towards the center of the space, slowly twirling as she continued scanning the ballroom. She would never let his work go unappreciated in its entirety. Her skirt billowed out slightly around her, until she slowed to a stop to cup one of the lilies. At last, his spouse settled her grateful gaze on him, with her hands clasped in front of her capelet's bow. "Oh, Hubert," she praised, breathless and beaming. "When did you? How did you?" "It was no matter. I did it for you." Marianne giggled, a serenade of birds all on its own, and wrapped her arms around him. He discovered he was laughing as well, when she went up onto her toes to kiss him. Hubert could have leaned down, but he found the gesture too endearing as a guilty pleasure of his. The smile he felt against his lips said she hardly minded. She dropped back to her usual height, a hand placed gingerly against his chest. "All of this, just for us?" Her words were soft and flattered, another sign she had grown accustomed to his brand of affectionate gestures, sometimes grand, but always private. That was where they flourished together. In a way, he had her patient nature to thank for the depth of their bond. Marianne would be sure to remind him of his steady and caring qualities. "Yes," he murmured, leaning down to kiss her again. She drew him in as a plant to the sun. "My lady, shall we have this dance?" Cupping his face more lovingly than she had any white bell blossom in the room, Marianne graced Hubert with a coy expression. "I would love nothing more." They made the most of the spacious ballroom, Marianne's laughter echoing among the candle-lit chandeliers as they enjoyed several dances. Her freedom without an audience was more than sufficient for him to celebrate their anniversary, and many more to come. As they swayed on the gleaming dance floor, a question lingered in Marianne's gaze. "Care to share your thoughts?" "My dearest, I also have a surprise for you." "You do?" Receiving gifts was hardly natural to Hubert. Through the persistence of the Black Eagles, and Marianne herself, he had ample practice. Not enough to expect these presents throughout the years, evidently, yet enough to look forward to what she might have in store. He followed her lead as she slowed their sway. When she stepped back, tracing the length of his arm to wrap her slender fingers around his, he followed his wife again towards the staircase. It felt absurd to think there was ever a time he might have not distinguished her from any other. "Marianne?" She merely smiled as her answer, squeezing his hand, and began the journey up the stairs. Her spare hand went to gathering her skirt, to prevent stepping on it as they ascended. Hubert staved off his curiosity by the simple delight of her braid, swinging gently as they walked together. The ballroom was close to the Enbar Palace, now largely a public building, rather than residential for political leaders. Guest quarters existed for other national representatives and similar figures. The exit brought them out to the cobblestone streets. Reinforcements were nearby to summon by way of magical flair, if necessary, which was another factor in his arrangements for the occasion. He did not anticipate that she would summon an ally of her own. She whistled into the twilight sky, painted by the withdrawing sun. Hubert heard the beating of feathered wings before he saw the silhouette of a Pegasus approaching them. Backlit by the sun, the creature trotted to a stop when it landed. The white coat had grey flecks, like dim starlight. Wind from its flight ruffled the bouquets by the ballroom entrance. Marianne released his hand, reaching to the Pegasus that obediently came over for her to stroke its muzzle. "Good girl," she offered affirmation to the well-trained Pegasus. The two of them faced him in tandem. "Happy anniversary." "For me? But they say no men can ride them." Hubert took tentative steps closer, looking into the Pegasus's eyes. He swore the creature was assessing him in return. Leave it to his bluebird to choose an animal that shared his analytical disposition. "Another myth," Marianne explained, peaceful and forgiving towards the former icon of her faith. One she retained, and through that she softened his own harsh perspective. Gradually. There was extra work to be done in that regard. Her honesty about shortcomings like those made that lofty goal attainable for her. "The church trained them to fear men. It doesn't come naturally to these lovely companions, and I helped train this one for dark magic casting. For you." He mirrored her earlier gesture, holding out his hand. The Pegasus nudged under his hand and huffed impatiently. He chuckled and patted her muzzle, as Marianne had before him. Hubert could learn by example, if nothing else. "I told her nice things about you." "Flatterer," Hubert complimented her, as though he could do anything else. The Pegasus demanded more attention by trying to pet herself against his offered hand, so Hubert brought up another to indulge her adequately. He could thank his spouse for instilling such yielding qualities in him, despite enduring the belief that he had no heart whatsoever. Marianne likely knew as much already when she laughed at him humoring the needy beast. She knows all of your deflections already, darling. Faded sunlight stretched across the city streets, seemingly for the sole purpose of illuminating the woman who chose to marry him. Him. Her love was objectively greater than he deserved. Since Marianne saw fit to say yes, even so, Hubert's mission was to prove she chose wisely. A shame the affectionate Pegasus wouldn't tolerate him stepping away to kiss his bride quite yet. He could certainly make up for that another time. What's her name? Svetlana. Proud and shy all at once, Marianne bit her lip as she awaited his reaction. There was a time when she would have shrunk at the thought of speaking up to begin with. He had the privilege of seeing her grow beyond that self-doubt, finding the courage to share the carefully chosen name. Svetlana was distinctly a Drestian, with a meaning that resonated with his own. He saw his mother's hand in this gift, and smirked. Still distant from her adoptive father, Marianne found solace in the company of Lady Vestra. His mother chose a name meaning bright heart for him, and his wife chose a name defined as light and world for his first ever Pegasus. Perfectly thoughtful. I would expect no less. Seeing his plight with the insistent Pegasus, she joined him to stand by Svetlana. The mount appeared markedly calmer with the two of them present. She didn't even huff again when Hubert reached for Marianne's hand. His spouse interlaced their fingers as effortlessly as a bird cozying into its nest. There was likewise a point in his life when Hubert struggled to receive a bag of coffee or a crocheted flower with any measure of poise. And there he was, beside his beloved, and the living creature she chose, trained and named, all for his sake. He closed the distance between them, to rest his forehead against hers, eyes drifting shut, to focus his attention on the feeling of her being so near to him. She spoke her promise in hushed tones. When you're ready, we can help you see the skies. The end.